Texas, and Lake Charles, Louisiana. He made several stops, including one at a shelter housing families and children whose homes were destroyed by the Texas flooding. The president comforting many and bringing a message of hope to those who have lost so much. Take a listen.
The water's disappearing, and we have a long way to go, but the water's disappearing, and you look at the neighborhoods and you see we just rode through this, and 2 days ago, even yesterday, they had water, and today it's all swept up and cleaned up, and you've got a lot of hard-working people, I'll tell you that. A lot of hard-working people.
On the ground tonight in West Houston is Steve Harrigan with the latest on the rescue and recovery efforts. Steve?
Judge, it was the second visit for President Trump to Texas since this storm hit. He met with survivors. He hugged some. He picked up a small girl. He played with children. He handed out meals of hot dogs to survivors, and he asked people what they needed. He also issued a prediction that Texas would recover much more quickly than people were saying. It would not be a matter of years, but instead a matter of months. Here on the west side of Houston, conditions are dire. Many houses along this road still covered 3 to 4 feet of flood water. We've been seeing people throughout the day go back to their homes with whatever they have, rafts, canoes, large trucks, to try and pull out what they can from that flood water. We've been seeing clothing go by, precious items, even a painting going by before as people try and pull out what they can. I've got to tell you, there is a strong smell of raw sewage from this water. I've seen a lot of people in surgery. A lot of it is from a controlled release of water from several reservoirs. There were real concerns here that dams could break, so they are continuing to release water, and they will do that for the next 10 days or so. So you see some people without boats walk up to the edge of this water, look down the street at houses that they still can't get to. They might not be able to get to them for another 2 weeks. Meantime, all around Houston, the scenes outside of dry houses are the same. You see piles of furniture out in front of the houses, on sidewalks or on the street. What was a bed, a couch, a carpet a week ago is now junk, ruined by the water. The mayor of Houston says he needs money now to pick up that debris that is rotting in the 90-degree heat and the sun here. This morning he was asking for $75 million immediately. By this afternoon, with the president here, that figure had gone up to $100 million. Judge, back to you.
All right, Steve Harrigan, thanks so much, and be safe out there. And joining me now by phone with more on the president's trip to Texas and Louisiana today, advisor to the president, Kellyanne Conway. All right, good evening, Kellyanne. Tell us about the president and how he was received by people in Texas and Louisiana.
As you saw, Judge, the president and the first lady were received beautifully by the people. I really was struck by the comments of one churchgoer. She made clear that she did not necessarily agree politically with the president, but she was so happy that someone of his stature would come and show the world how important it is to stand in solidarity with each other now and with care for each other. And that's what's clear. I mean, the president is very happy with many of the recovery efforts to date, but we all know it's a long road ahead. He showed up. He's been on the ground, as has been his cabinet, the First Lady, the Vice President, the Second Lady. But he's also, in short order, asked Congress, as they head back from their very long vacation, to act swiftly to get the $7.9 billion approved. And that's important, too. We recognize we've got tens of thousands of people on the ground there, volunteers, officials, but they need money. Housing is a problem, food, shelter, clean water, a disease, of course, and people, as they rebuild their lives, the federal government, the president will be there.
You know, Kellyanne, I wonder if people really can comprehend, as I talked about in the last hour when my family lost everything in a flood, what it's like to actually lose everything and not have anything and to have to start all over. But, you know, the president that you and I saw today is the man that we know. I think it was interesting for Americans to see Donald Trump, the president of the United States, be the man that we know he is, someone who is focused on you as he speaks with you, who will, you know, give you his complete attention, and the kind, generous, social man that we know him to be. And I think that this was a tremendous opportunity. And it's good to hear that people who may not agree with him politically recognize that there is goodness in this man.
Well, that's right. He's also somebody, when he has had the capacity and the wherewithal to help, he has stepped up and done that throughout his life.
And he gave $1 million, Kellyanne, of his own money.
He and the First Lady have given $1 million of their own money and encourage others to donate however they can, whether it's clothing or their time, blood, certainly connecting people with the information they need, a little bit of donation here and there, pet rescue, send diapers. There's so much that can be done, so many websites, so much social media that exists now that didn't exist previously with major natural disasters. But I think going back to the capacity and the full measure of the man, I was struck today watching it all, Judge, what will the reaction be from people who seem to have one single gear about him, which is attack, 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 diminish, diminish. They can't deny what they saw today, somebody who really does empathize and sympathize with the folks there and the suffering. And we've seen it many times. He's a family man. If you ask him how he would like to spend whatever little spare time he has, it would be with his wife, his children, his grandchildren. And you saw that in sharp relief today. But I would ask those who do feel like it's their duty, their responsibility to do nothing but attack the president, to really lay down their arms and really look at the role that he is playing on behalf of a grateful nation, telling these rescuers, these volunteers, and certainly the people in need, and the worst of all, those who have lost loved ones.
Yes.
That we will not soon forget. Nobody's checking a box and leaving them behind starting next week and turning their attention to other things. We're going to have a very busy September on Capitol Hill, but we want Congress to act very swiftly on the hurricane relief first and foremost.
All right. Kellyanne Conway, very well said. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judge.
All right. And joining me now from Houston with more on the continuing recovery efforts, Galveston County Sheriff Henry Treshesset. Sheriff, thanks so much for being here tonight. Look, one of the things I know about Texas is that most people in Texas have dogs and horses and animals. And I know that you have been involved in safety, recovery, and rescue efforts. But I want to talk about some of the pictures that just stay in my mind of horses in water up to here. What are you doing in Texas to protect animals?
Well, when we were pulling people off on the boats and onto the main highways, if they were able to bring their pets, we assisted them with it. They were able to go to the shelters with the owners. And what happened this time was freshwater. During Ike, it was a saltwater event, and we had to have another route to assist with cattle.
Interesting.
My county, fortunately, has more population of people than cattle, so we haven't really had an event with the horses and cattle as much as we did with Ike.
With Ike a couple of years ago. How many years ago was Ike, Sheriff? I
believe 9.
It was that long? Wow, that was a long time ago. Anyway, Sheriff, you're the sheriff of Galveston County, Galveston being a county adjacent to Harris, Houston. Now, I understand that there is a roadway between Houston and Galveston, and you were literally acting as a rescue effort on the ramp of this highway or freeway. How did that work?
Yes, ma'am. Interstate 45 is dead end in Galveston, actually, and it's between Houston and Galveston. And on 517, we approached the bridge just after sunup, and the water was coming over the divider between the north and southbound of the highway. And when we started getting boats there, we were launching them off of the side of the ramp of the highway. And as people were being brought and ferried with everything from canoes to jet skis to even our boats, and we were pulling them right onto the freeway, walking them up the ramp, and getting them on buses. I would say we had probably on average about 100 rescues an hour bringing just to my location right on I-45 and 517.
Let me ask you this, Sheriff. I mean, you know, that you rescue 100 people an hour in that one particular location. I mean, what about people who are infirm and are not able to, you know, to take care of themselves and get pulled out of these situations?
Well, actually, we had several rescues like that. We had a senior home. It must have been a private home. I believe there were 14 to 16 elderly there. And we were assisted by the National Guard, the military truck. Our deputies got in the truck with them to show them where to go. We put everybody in the truck and got them to the bridge on 45 and 517 also. We had several people brought up on wheelchairs, and some of them that were actually just wrapped in blankets, loaded on the boat. And as soon as they'd hit to the shore, we'd carry them on in and bring them up the ramp.
Well, and Sheriff, I mean, I know you and I know people in Texas. I mean, they are resourceful, resilient, independent, and certainly are going to work their way out of this. But what would you ask Americans in light of where you are now in Galveston and in Houston? What needs to be done aside from Congress making sure to pass a $7.9 billion relief effort? What do you want individuals to do?
Well, again, the volunteers, there's no way we could have rescued as many people as we did without the volunteers. My agency and all the other law enforcement and first responders did an outstanding job, but the volunteerism that stepped up to play. Now we're in a time when we need to assist with remediation. Right. Going into these individuals' houses, you've got to pull out all the carpet, the flooring, the sheetrock, the insulation, or mold starts. Yep. I think today the temperature was almost 90 degrees, and without the right effect of it, that mold starts growing and growing very fast.
That's a problem.
So you've got to remediate quick.
Yes. All right. Sheriff Henry Cherchesset, thanks so much for being with us. Good to see you again.
Thank you for calling me up.
All right. And coming up, much more on the president's emotional trip to Texas and Louisiana on this very busy night of news. Stay with us. Back in a moment. Breaking tonight, President Trump and the First Lady back at the White House after visiting storm-ravaged Texas and Louisiana. Joining me now with a reaction to the president's trip and the administration's handling of the disastrous flooding, Rasmussen Report's political analyst Amy Holmes. Now, Amy, I understand that you just returned from Europe, and you were just telling me that Europeans were monitoring Hurricane Harvey. Tell me about that.
Absolutely. I was just in Switzerland for the last week, and European news was riveted on Hurricane Harvey and, the suffering of our fellow Americans in Houston, Texas, minute-by-minute coverage, talking to people on the ground that have been rescued from the flood, covering the American response by FEMA, by state officials. It was really interesting to see, that American news, even something like Hurricane Harvey, becomes global news. And when President Trump says the world is watching, they really are, Judge.
And were they taking a position as it relates to the president and his activity in flying down to Texas?
Not particularly. They did report, of course, on President Trump going down to Corpus Christi and, making the statements that he did down there. I didn't see so much criticism of the president's response, which I have to say, Judge, is really surprising because European media can be even more anti-Trump than American mainstream media.
Well, what's to criticize? At least he showed up. Katrina,
Absolutely.
Don't get me started on Bush. Took him 2 weeks to show up and said that FEMA was doing a heck of a job.
Well, Judge Jean, the hypocrisy that we've seen in the coverage of criticizing Donald Trump. If you remember the BP oil spill under President Obama's watch, you remember he didn't go down to the Gulf for 2 weeks.
That's right.
And even James Carville went on television ranting and raving, saying, "Where is the president? We need you. We are dying down here."
Right.
That's one of his fellow party members who was being critical of President Obama. And over a month later, President Obama gave a press conference saying, I was wrong. He even apologized for his what seemed to be lack of attention.
Well, you would think at least that this president would get some credit, but
no, they're focused on the First Lady's shoes.
Yeah, right, the shoes.
That's apparently what's important.
An open I did the last hour, she walks off the plane with Nikes. What do they think, that Nike flew in a new pair while they were in the air? She had no intention of walking around in heels. It's none of their business.
No, I was going to say, it just shows you the totally skewed priorities, looking for any small thing to criticize. Right. It's just pouring down pettiness, as I was saying.
Anyway, let's talk about you and, you're a pollster. Mm-hmm. How do you think this is going to play going forward on the president's numbers and the American people's reaction to him?
Well, I think it should, if you look at past disasters where there's been a positive response by the executive, and we know that the governor, Greg Abbott, he says he gives FEMA an A+ plus, and that there has been exemplary coordination between the feds and state authorities. But, you know, Judge Jeanine, I also want to point out our fellow Americans and their response. I mean, to see people coming to one another's rescue, I mean, it's really shown you who we are as a people. And of course, when it comes to polling, there is a rally around the flag, rally around the commander-in-chief. Particularly in this case, I think we'll see it because President Trump has been so responsive. You know, FEMA was down there 2 days prior to Hurricane Harvey hitting. But you see, that's Donald Trump. The man is a builder. He's a doer. He's a guy who gets it done. He understands this. Right. Well, Tevi Troy, writing in the Wall Street Journal, he's an expert on the presidential handling of these types of crises. And he points out, let's also remember that President Trump made General Kelly his chief of staff. This is someone who just came from Department of Homeland Security, who has also been handling this with, great skill.
All right. Amy Holmes, always good to have you on Justice.
Thank you, Judge.
All right. And coming up, Rick Leventhal joins us live with an update on the still dire situation in many parts of Texas, plus my opening statement on the latest Jim Comey controversy. You're not going to want to miss it. We'll be right back.
This is a Fox News alert. I'm Robert Gray. North Korean state media claims to have a hydrogen bomb for its long-range intercontinental ballistic missile. According to reports, dictator Kim Jong-un inspected an H-bomb to be loaded into a new ICBM during a visit to the North Nuclear Weapons Institute. The country has conducted 5 nuclear tests since 2006, including 2 last year. They've also conducted 2 ICBM flight tests in July. The July 28th test reached a height of 2,300 miles in space before returning to Earth. So far, no official word from the Pentagon, but Japan's prime minister says he spoke with President Trump, saying that in the face of an escalating situation with North Korea, close cooperation is needed between their countries as well as South Korea and China. I'm Robert Gray. Now back to Justice with Judge Jeanine.
Tonight, President Trump traveling to flood-ravaged Houston as well as Lake Charles, Louisiana. So many people and communities still facing dire conditions there. Senior correspondent Rick Leventhal is on the ground with the latest in Vidor, Texas. Hello, Rick.
Good evening, Judge. We're in a grocery store parking lot, which has served as an evacuation center for people who've been flooded out of their homes. It was a hub of activity all day, in fact, for most of this week, established by volunteers, but now staffed by some members of the Louisiana National Guard and other officials. And they're still here tonight, those officials are, but the volunteers were all sent home because there is a curfew in effect, not just in the city of Vidor, but across the entire county because of issues with looters, for example. The Louisiana State National Guard, as I mentioned, is here, along with Texas State Police, Texas Rangers, and we just saw a crew of them. In fact, they have one of those heavily armored MRAPs, a military vehicle that the state has purchased, and I don't know if you can see it in the dark, but they have a couple of those here that the Texas State Police do, and they've been sending their guys out in those because they are high water vehicles. They can handle the flooded neighborhoods, and they can get them into the areas where some residents have told us that they've seen looters on boats going into homes that are flooded out to try and steal from those homes. So that's one of the things we've seen these Rangers and state police trying to stop. And they are heavily armed, and they are looking for those folks. And we know there was at least one arrest yesterday of someone attempting to loot someone's home. We've also seen a lot of outpouring of support, Judge, from volunteers from across the state, from across the region, from as far north as Illinois that I spoke with, and from Texas and Florida, and one of the guys I spoke with earlier today, a young man named Joe Rubio, who owns a business called Blacklist Diesel in Cocoa Beach. He said he put a message on Facebook earlier in the week about trying to help out the people of Houston, and he was flooded with donations. He loaded them up on a flatbed towed by his pickup truck. He put an ATV on there and an airboat, and thousands of pounds worth of donations, and he drove all night with his buddies. We talked to him earlier today.
We got a Razor 1000. It's got a lift and portals on 35. We got about 16,000 pounds of water, fresh water in bottles. About 1,200 pounds of baby formula and diapers, and probably 3,000 pounds of new clothes, dog food, shower stuff. I don't even know what they call it, utensils.
Where did it all come from?
People just donated it. I made a Facebook post on Monday, earlier this week. Said, hey, we're going to go to Houston, later to help out. we got a lot of customers here, a lot of friends, family, and it just blew up.
Joe had 3 more hours to drive to pass out all the stuff that he had piled up on that truck. He said he would stick around and help for as long as he possibly could. One of the people that will need Joe's help and the help of people like him is a young lady named Macy Burton, who we met a short time ago in her neighborhood, very close to where we're standing. Her neighborhood's still underwater tonight, and the house that she and her father bought and moved into just a couple of weeks ago is in 2 or 3 feet of water, and here was what she told me.
Well, I'm just trying to stay optimistic until I can actually see what is wrong with it inside, you know. I'm trying to think on the positive that maybe everything was sealed up really tightly and nothing really got inside. So, yeah. It's hard, but it'll get better.
Judge, you hear a lot about Texas Strong, and we're seeing it tonight and every day that we're here.
Rick Leventhal, thanks so much. Be safe out there, Rick. And now to my opening statement. It's time for the Department of Justice and the State Department to be true to their mission and recognize the significance of the election of 2016. The American people elected Donald Trump to change the way things are done in Washington. To us, truth and justice matter, and law and order is mandatory. No more cover-ups, no more rigged investigations, no more cutting organized criminal enterprises like the Clinton Foundation any slack. This week we learned that James Comey, long before that fateful July 4th weekend, when Hillary Clinton was interviewed, actually began drafting a memo exonerating a criminal target of a federal investigation of all criminal liability. And this week, we learned that both the Department of Justice and the State Department opposed a Freedom of Information release of foilable material on the Clinton email investigation. Both Justice and State fought against allowing the American people getting the truth on the Clinton investigation. And amazingly, both Justice and State defended the privacy of Hillary Rodham Clinton's records over our right to know. This must stop. The deep state, Obama and Clinton, the holdovers in both the Justice and State Departments must be eliminated. Even a federal judge is fed up with them ordering them to release information to the American public. Now, State Department Secretary Rex Tillerson may know the world, but I'm not so sure he understands government holdovers looking to protect the Clinton dynasty. Jeff Sessions needs to follow his prosecutorial instincts and open a federal criminal investigation into the actions of Hillary Rodham Clinton and impanel a grand jury immediately. This woman should not get a free pass because she lost an election. Her reign was one of bold, brazen, in-your-face, pay-to-play corruption. And I'm not even talking about the hypocrisy of this so-called women's rights activist whose feminism starts and ends with the women who have accused her husband of wrongdoing and the contributions to her foundation from countries that literally hate and kill women. And Jim Comey. He needs to be the target of an active criminal investigation for obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and perjury. His prejudging an investigation before 17 witnesses and the target of that criminal investigation were even interviewed is the essence of public corruption. He lied to the Senate Judiciary Committee when he said he only made the decision to not charge, which, by the way, was not his decision to make in the first place, after the investigation was completed.
Director, did you make the decision not to recommend criminal charges relating to classified information before or after Hillary Clinton was interviewed by the FBI on July the 2nd?
After. But if colleagues of ours believe I am lying about when I made this decision, please urge them to contact me privately so we can have a conversation about this. All I can do is tell you again, the decision was made after that because I didn't know what was going to happen in that interview. She maybe lied during the interview in a way we could prove.
That's a bunch of hogwash. Further proof of that corruption is that Hillary Clinton promised Attorney General Loretta Lynch that she could keep her job after that undisclosed meeting on the tarmac between Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch. And Jim Comey, Mr. Holier-than-thou, who has repeatedly shown himself to be a grandstander, an egomaniac, and a political operative, has shown himself to be the essence of the swamp that Americans so want to clean up. It is time to go after Jim Comey. And that's my open. Tell me what you think on my Facebook page or Twitter.